Did you know there's one movie that perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with financial advice culture online today? And that is Jurassic Park. The movie that taught us DNA can be fun, raptors are clever, and Jeff Goldblum only gets sexier the closer he gets to death. But if you pay attention, it can also teach you why you should take everything you're told online with a jelly-quivering spoonful of skepticism. Hello and welcome to Acting on Finance. I'm your host David, a man who believes that wearing a fanny pack over your shoulder instead of your waist doesn't make it better, it just moves it to eye level where people have time to process it and judge your decision to wear a fanny pack. Quick note, before we start, this is education, not financial advice. So if I was giving advice, it would be to compare the storage capacity of a fanny pack to a standard jeans pocket and then question every decision that led you there. So let's talk about that one phrase that causes the most damage in finance online. I did it, you can too. The phrase that fuels FOMO, survivor bias, and the belief you're 6 years away from becoming a millionaire if you just buy someone's course and wake up at 4:15 a.m. Now, fair warning, I'll be using the F word a lot in this video. I'm sorry, I know we all hate it, but it's necessary. So, finfluencers. God, I hate that word. Finfluencers love explaining how they made money in the past and why that means you can too. And if you can't, you're lazy. They take the epilogue of their success and try to sell it to you as the prologue of yours, usually via a perpetually sold out seminar or proprietary software package. And while they may genuinely understand investing, the idea that because they succeeded means you'll succeed following the exact same path is where things become dangerous. Because finance isn't just about action, it's about timing, environment, and conditions. Which brings us neatly to a movie about those exact things, Jurassic Park. In Jurassic Park, Dr. Malcolm explains chaos theory while aggressively flirting with Dr. Sattler directly in front of her boyfriend, Dr. Grant, showcasing a level of confidence not seen since Arnold Schwarzenegger in Pumping Iron. He explains that chaos theory is the idea that in complex systems, very small differences in conditions can produce wildly different outcomes over time. He demonstrates this by placing a drop of water on Dr. Sattler's hand. It runs in one direction, he does it again, and it runs down in a different direction. In financial content, finfluencers often use the phrase, I did it, you can too, and then proceed to explain the strategy they used and why it worked. But here's the problem. They're showing you the first drop and telling you if you put just another drop on, it'll do the same thing. This is the financial equivalent of someone who sprinted blindfolded across a freeway, survived, and now sells a course on safe crossing strategies to follow. They don't sell certainty, no one can predict the future, but they sell the emotional association you make with their success and your own future success, without ever proving it. Luckily, we will discover why this is often not entirely accurate or honest, or as Dr. Malcolm says,
that is one big pile of shit.
So let's use property as an example, because most online wealth content eventually becomes buy one property, leverage equity, repeat forever. Now 2012 wasn't just a great year for cinema, with That's My Boy, Piranha 3DD, and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. It was also the beginning of an unusually favourable period for Australian property, and this is often a period in which many influencers made their wealth, or started to make it. Now fair warning, this next part gets a little more economicsy, so if you stay with me for the next minute or so, I will reward you with another aggressively attractive shot of Jeff Goldblum. A few key conditions drove the 2012 period. First, interest rates fell dramatically from 3.5 in 2012 to 1.5 by 2016. So if you had a mortgage, it actually became cheaper over time. Second, prices rose rapidly at the same time. Sydney's median house price moved from roughly $640,000 to over $1.1 million within 5 years. Third, the broader economic environment was relatively stable post-GFC, which for the visual learners is The Big Short. Ryan Gosling with unsettlingly black hair, Margot Robbie in a bathtub, and lots of people losing money. Cheap money was everywhere, which basically meant working, saving, and buying a house was still considered a financial plan rather than simply an elaborate form of self-harm. Fourth, rising prices allowed people to repeatedly refinance and borrow again, because your property increased in value while the cost of your debt went down at the same time. And finally, lending standards were looser before the Royal Commission. Credit was easy to access, borrowing capacity was higher, and banks weren't really slowing things down so much as enthusiastically helping everyone accelerate towards the same cliff together. When you combine falling rates, rising prices, easy lending, and stable conditions, investing starts to look easy. And this is important because when money is easy to get, it helps both buyers and sellers, meaning everyone rides the same upward wave together. Basically, it was a property paradise. Congratulations for surviving the economics section. Here's 5 seconds of Jeff Goldblum with sexy music. Now compare that to the environment from roughly 2019 to today. The conditions haven't just changed slightly, they've inverted. First, interest rates haven't been falling, they've exploded upward, moving from 0.1% in 2022 to around 4.35%, faster than Timothée Chalamet's career, meaning mortgages became more expensive over time instead of cheaper. Second, prices are starting from a far higher base. Sydney's median house price has moved from roughly $1 million in 2019 to more than $1.6 million today. Median wages have risen too, to around $75,000, but nowhere near enough to keep pace. Back in 2012, a Sydney house was roughly 12 times the median salary. Today, it's more than 21 times. This is like running a race and noticing the people holding the ribbon have started jogging backwards faster than you're running forwards. A 10% deposit that once required around 1 year's salary now requires closer to 2, which feels very much like taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and then directly into the arms of a velociraptor. Third, the broader economy is far less stable post-pandemic. Inflation surged above 7%, energy costs jumped, supply chains broke. Fourth, the buy, refinance and repeat strategy no longer functions the same way. Even if your property rises in value, banks now want proof you can actually service a larger debt at higher rates, which means the limiting factor is no longer whether your property increased in value, it's whether you can survive the repayments afterwards. Finally, lending standards are significantly stricter after the Royal Commission. Banks examine lending more closely, apply larger serviceability buffers, and reduce borrowing capacity. So instead of everyone surfing the same upward wave together, laughing and hugging, the market now feels much closer to Mad Max beyond Thunderdome. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves having paid too much for a property. Buyers are stretching to get in, sellers are trying to hold their price, and outcomes are far less predictable. Well done, hanging in there once again. Enjoy. Now I know if anyone actually watched this, they'd be commenting, David, nobody buys in Sydney anymore, just go to Perth, it's the new frontier of affordability. So let's look at Perth. Perth's median house price cracked the $1 million mark in early 2026, meaning you're now paying 2018 Sydney prices for Perth property, except you're doing it with 2026 interest rates and significantly less hope. The chaos hasn't disappeared, it's just moved to Western Australia. You're still dealing with the same serviceability tests, the same wage to price gap, and the same lending conditions. You're just doing it 4,000 kilometers away from your support network. And to really finish off the I did it, you can too argument, look at the income shift. Back in 2012, a household earning about $100,000 could realistically buy a median Sydney house and still maintain some form of human happiness. By 2026, you need closer to $200,000 just to get the bank to respond with what could be best described as a cautious emotional neutrality. Now, there's another part of this that rarely gets mentioned online, the bank of mum and dad. Back around 2010, only about 12% of first home buyers relied on family assistance, and the average contribution was about $23,000. That gift covered roughly 35% of a deposit, which was a huge advantage. Today, more than 60% of home buyers rely on family support. What used to be optional has become necessary, like watching 27 Marvel movies and 7 Disney Plus series just to understand why everyone's pointing at the sky in a post-credit scene. At the same time, the average parental contribution has risen above $100,000. But despite being 4 times larger, it only just covers the median price in the bargain state of Perth. It doesn't really give you an edge anymore, it just gets you to the starting line. So now you have a system where more people need help, the help is bigger, and somehow it achieves less. If the Bank of Mum and Dad were an actual institution, it would rank as one of the country's largest mortgage lenders, which is a slightly concerning sentence to say out loud, along with, that Mr. Arnold sure has taken his time coming back from switching the servers on. And this is where chaos theory matters. In the earlier environment, the initial conditions were almost perfect. Cheap debt, rising prices, easy lending, stable conditions. Today, most of the variables are reversed. In chaos theory, this is called sensitive dependence on initial conditions. When people online say, just buy and repeat, what they're often describing is how that strategy behaved in a very specific, very lucky environment. They're teaching you to sail while ignoring the fact the wind completely changed direction. And that's really the entire point. Ian Malcolm's argument in Jurassic Park was that you cannot assume a complex system will behave the way you want it to, and also that shirt buns are completely unnecessary when you have a boo-boo. And finance is a complex system, so when someone online says, I did it, you can too, what they leave out is context. They leave out when they started, what conditions existed, how much leverage was available, how cheap debt was, and how different the ecosystem actually looked. Because the same actions taken in different conditions do not produce the same outcomes. So before following any financial advice online, ask 2 questions. What ecosystem actually created this person's success? And what were their initial conditions? Because without context, it's very easy to mistake a favorable period for a reliable strategy. And that's the part that turns I Did It You Can Too from motivational into very expensive life lesson. So that's it from me. Do you think influencers present a rosy picture without enough context? What's the biggest submission you've seen from them? Or do you think they are in-depth enough? Like, subscribe, and let me know. And if you want to see leveraging equity explained through the steadily collapsing plot coherence of the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End era of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, with the level of sarcasm that coming from someone you knew in real life would probably earn them a swift throat punch, let me know.